Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we're Masechtas Bava Daf Ayin. We are going to begin on the very top line of Ayin Amud Aleph. Amri Nahardoi. So it's said that loikas vinan urkasa amataltali, that they do not write an urkasa when it comes to movable objects. An urkasa, Rashi says, is a harsha, which is basically a power of attorney. Someone else could collect it on your behalf. So we don't do this when it comes to matalton. Rabashi la meimer, so my taima, why not? So amalei mishum Rabbi Yochanan, because of Rabbi Yochanan, as Rashi says, the hoyel ve'enim rishus baalim. Since matalton, this matalton is not in the rishus of the baalim, and that in yochel, you can't be mocked this shit. So in yochel aknois l'shliach, you also cannot give this over to a shliach. Hilkach im avad, if let's say this item is in transit and lost, yochel aksar, you can retract with toiva miyad hanemon, and to be able to be toiveya from the original person, the depositor. So let's go back to the bar. So my time is since it's not in the rishus because it's metaltalin, so therefore you cannot. We're not going to write a orchasa on metaltalin. Again, this power of attorney, which allows someone else to collect it on your behalf. We don't write this power of attorney document of metaltalin the kafri. Only when it comes to a situation where it's being denied. Time of the kafri, the mechsikashikra, because there's an element of denying. The defendant denies that that he has this deposit, so he can't appoint a third party to collect it. The mechsikashikra of kafre, but if he does not deny kasvina, then we'll write it. If you have this power of attorney document that you do not write, quote, zildun, go and judge, and take it yourself, it has no substance. My time, because he can say, he can say to this third party, you're not my baldevarim. So again, you want someone to collect on your behalf. So no. We're not going to allow it because that person can say, I'm not going to give it to you because you're not my baldevarim. You have no connection to this case. Rabbi, if he writes on it, that basically you have a connection to some of it, half, third, or quarter, that the shliach is to keep some of it, mishtoi dina kula. So therefore, this the person who is holding on to this is not able to say, you're not my baldevarim, because he does have a financial claim to it. In all matters, if this person, this third party, grabs it, we're not going to take it away from him. Once it's written, quote, kol dimisane min dina, all the expenses from din, kabus olai, I'm accepting upon myself, shliach shavi. In that situation, he's clearly accepting upon himself the din as being shliach. Some say shut v'shavya, that actually he's actually making himself not just as a shliach but as a partner. So l'may nafgamina lemitvas palga, referring to taking half. Because in fact, if he's a shutaf, so then he should have the right to be able to take half. Says Rashi, Mamun shehevi imrotzel akiv chetzer. He can maybe take half because he's a shutaf, so he has rights to half. Maybe the other half not. If he's a shliach, he's a shliach. So Rashi, hilchos a shliach shavya lo shakol midi, and therefore he doesn't have rights to take anything unless, of course, it's written more than that. Masnisan ganav al pi shnayim. It's a pretty famous Mishnah. You stole in front of two witnesses, which obviously you're going to definitely be chayv kefil in that situation. But tavach amarcha al pihem, and you were also shechted or sold with them. So, or al pi shnayim acherim, or let's say there was two other witnesses that saw it. Misham teshmi arba v'chamisha. So it doesn't have to be that the same Adam who saw you steal it saw you do tvicha mechira. Even though you could say, well, the second group of witnesses are really being saimach on the first, because the second group of witnesses, they don't know necessarily that he stole it. All they did was see him slaughter an animal. It turned out after the testimony of the first that taka this was a stolen animal. Okay, well, it doesn't matter. So even though one needs the other doesn't need them. Ganav b'makom b'Shabbos. Now, a person's not allowed to do these things on Shabbos, selling on Shabbos. Ganav b'machal avodah zara, or if you sold it for avodah zara. And here's the key line. Ki chedesh is ganav v'tavach miyom kippurim. If you did the tvicha on Yom Kippur, which will be an Isser Kares, Gadim Mishel Aviv, you stole from your father, v'tavach ha'machar, and you shechted and sold it, v'yachach meis Aviv, and then afterwards your father died, which means you would have been Yarish it anyway, because you were the rightful heir, but you stole it before. Gadim v'tavach v'yachach hikdish, for that same matter, you stole it, and then afterwards became hektish, or you're makdish it, Nisham tashmi yarba v'chamisha. So this is another chiddush, that you still have a chiyuv of paying dalad v'hei, as we'll understand this Mishnah more. Okay, fine. So you would think maybe, for example, on the Tavach and Yom Kippur, you have kares, maybe you think Kamla but Rabbi Minah. So according to this, no, there's still a din tashlumin. Ganav Tavach l'rafua or klavim. Let's say you shechted it for some medicinal purposes or for feeding your dogs. Hashoich of an imsus treifa. You shecht it and you find out this animal was not royal shchita. Hashoich et chulin ba'azara. So let's say you shecht chulin ba'azara in the base of Mikdash. Misham tashim yarba chamisha. You still have to pay 4 and 5. Rav Shimon pater b'shnei elu. However, he says you're pater in these two cases, and Rashi reminds us what these two are, and it'll tell us the reason why, the famous reason of Rav Shimon. Betreva b'chulin ba'azara because savar Rav Shimon shchita shein ruya lo shmin shchita. If you do a shchita which is not a fit shchita, it doesn't count. Therefore, you're going to be pater from dal b'hei. Avul rafua of a klavim shchita royahi. It's still considered to be a shchita because if he wants, instead of feeding his animals or feeding the sick person, he could have eaten it himself. Therefore, it's a shchita roy, and therefore he would be chayav dal b'hei. Says the Gemara. Leimas disan deloik Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva toimer davar v'chatzi davar. He says the din davar when the pasuk says Rashi calls up Hishnaim Edom Yokum davar. So based on that pasuk, we make a drasha that you have to testify the whole thing and not chatzi davar. Says Rashi, chatzi davar d'k'masadi de'ilav edi geneva yikamir b'didei kotavach. As we said, the second group of witnesses who said that he saw this person shecht, that's all they did was see that. They don't know it was stolen. So this is really a clear case of chatzi davar, which I already alluded to the answer, but this, again, perhaps is not like Rabbi Kiva. How do we see that? The Sanya. When he went to learn Torah by him, it was Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, Eitzel Abba. As we continue, Ayin Amud Beis, Abba Chalafna. He went to Abba Chalafna, which is the name of the father of Rabbi Yossi. Rashi says, this is Cheskes Habatim for us. Person 8, the first year in some property, in front of 2 witnesses. Shniya b'fnei shnayim, a second year in front of 2 other witnesses. Shlishis b'fnei shnayim. Mahu, what's the din? Is that mitzaref to say that was a chazaka? He's a chazaka on the property. Sarmelo harizu chazaka. Yeah, that's a good chazaka. Sarmelo, he says, you know what? Afani yomerkin. I agree. El Rabbi Kiva chaylik whatever. Rabbi Kiva disagrees. Rabbi Kiva oimer davar chatzi davar, because each testimony on itself is not enough. Each of the witnesses need one another. So our mission is not like Rabbi Kiva that would say the same thing of davar l'chatzi davar, and he would not be chayav dal b'hei. So I'm Rabbi, I feel to him Rabbi Kiva. Milo ma'idi Rabbi Kiva. V'shnayim oimrim kidesh. V'shnayim oimrim boyal. If you have 2 witnesses that say that she is actually a married woman, and then you have 2 other witnesses that say that she was boyal ashes ish. To answer her to the whole world. So, or for that matter, just to push it, say that not necessarily that she committed Eishasish, but they saw her being boil this man. They had Bia. So in that situation, that testimony answer her to the whole world, or maybe she's just a penuya. The Afghan the Edibia Srichel Edi Kedushin, Kivan the Edi Kedushin, Srichel Edibia, Davar Krinan Bay. It's still considered the whole thing because the Edi Kedushin stand on its own. And therefore, even though it's true that Edibia needs the Edi Kedushin don't need Edibia. Hachinami. Afgav the Edi Tvicha Srichel Edi Geneva, Kivan the Edi Geneva, Srichel Edi Tvicha, Davar Krinan Bay. It's still considered to be the same thing, therefore it's acceptable. Rabbanan Hai Davar V'Chatzi Davar Lemuti Mai. According to the Rabbanan, what do they do with this? Lemuti Echad Omer the Echad B'Gabba, Echad Omer Echad B'Kreisa. When it comes to the din of testifying, whether a woman, Rashi says, Se'or Re'isi B'Kishriatz B'Oiseha, that I saw that she's a Gedoyla, and therefore should B'Chayv Oinshin, or for that matter, for the Kedushin to be a valid Kedushin. So all these different inyanim, we want to make sure that she's a Gedoyla. So we said, well, I saw one hair on her finger, Kishriatz B'Oiseha, and the other one was on her stomach. In other words, on two physical different locations, whether or not this is a guzma, the locations, but the point is that we saw hairs of physical maturity, not just regular hair, but hair that grows only upon a person who has reached a certain level of shown maturity of two hairs. So each one only said one hair. So hai chatzi davar v'chatzi edasu. That certainly isn't good. It's chatzi edus. It's not even that they're saying half the thing, they're not even half testimony. They're not even saying full testimony each. El amuti shnaim ormim echad, because there was only one witness. So no, shnaim ormim echad b'gavu, shnaim ormim echad b'kreisa. You have two witnesses, which is the minimum what you need, but they only say on chatzi davar. They give proper anus, but on chatzi davar. The other one gives on chatzi davar. Hani amri katanihi, v'hani amri katanihi. Both of them are saying she's a katana, and therefore, for that reason, that certainly doesn't work. Okay, let's go out of order. Let's start off with question 6. We just did that. So my time to be keeping a way to be the tvicha doi havi chatzi davar. What's the reason why Rabbi Kiva agrees by Edi Tvicha it's not an issue of chatzi davar? Because the Edi Geneva don't need Edi Tvicha. Because each one is basically she's a katana. Right? Kivan the kol shemeidim al sar achas katanihi. Therefore, it doesn't work. Question 5, going back. My time with the mandi omer lo kasvinan orkasa mataltali. Why do we say that you cannot write this document, which is a power of attorney for a third party to collect on matalton? So Rashi, Dirshu says, a mataltik Rav Yochanan the davar she'enim b'rshusai in yochlik noiso. Since it's not in your rishus, you don't have ability to do that. And since it's a deposit in someone else's place, so you can't be makdish the davar she'enim b'rshusai, you also can't do this. 5b. My time in the Omer lo kasvin and orchas amatalti de kafre. Just because of nixik kashikra. It's only because it looks like you're lying, but otherwise it'll be okay. Okay. Let's see. Question TB 29. Edi cheskas gimel shanim im hiido begimel kitois obeis kito sheido achas. Okay, so when it comes to Geneva, it's considered to, so Edi Chazaka, it's Chatzi Davar. Each one needs each other. However, Edi Geneva and Tvicha, it's not Chatzi Davar, because even though it's true, the Nehi, the Edi Tvicha, Stricha, and Edi Geneva does not need Edi Tvicha. So that's TB 29. Okay. TB 29, I'll put this like that. TB 29 and up here. Okay. All right, let's continue. Let's continue by the 2 dots. So it's a pretty famous sugya we just went through. Obviously, there's a shas sugya, there's more to it, but that's pashab shah. Ganavu machar b'shabes v'chulu. So we're going to focus on not the Geneva part, which is an issue, but he sold it on Shabbos. So it says in our Mishnah that if a person is gonna be machar b'Shabbos, so on all these different cases, it says that you or misham tashav v'chamisha. Now the question is why? If in fact you're chayiv misa for violating Shabbos, so, but again, it doesn't say ganav tavach machar. It specifically says ganav machar. Okay, and there's obviously a reason why that was tvicha was left out. So let's continue. Masani Potter, how can you tell me that you're chayiv dal beheyu? We see also your Potter. So Amar Rami Bar Chama Kitan Yehi the Potter. When are you Potter? But Oimrlo, when you say to him, Okoitz te'ena mitenasi, uproot or remove the fig from my fig tree, Vatiknili Genevo Secha, and then I will acquire your Geneva. So Amri Vikivan Dachi Tavale Kamon Bedina. 1 second. So if that would be the case, that he said this, look at Rashi. So he did this, he was Chai Misa. So this is the reason. It wasn't just Umoicher that he sold it, but the Mechira was by him taking it off the tree, and that's an Isser Diraisa. And therefore, since he did that, that's why he's Pater from Dal the Hay, because Kimam Ramino, because he's Chai Misa. So Gemara says 1 second. So if you would actually, if the owner of the fig tree would take the one who plucked the figs off the tree to court to say, please return the figs that you took. So lo amrinan le zil shlim. We're not going to say he has to give it back. Why? Because if in fact we don't tell the Ganav, says Rashi, zil shlim ishtachach dala mechirahu. It's not considered to be a mechira because since he was machal Shabbos, so he has no chiyuv of giving anything back. So if that's the case, ha-mechira nami lo mechirahi. It obviously wasn't a sale, and therefore he shouldn't be chayiv dal v'hei altogether. Throw your geneva into my chatzar, then I'll acquire that which you stole. And that's how, that's what we're talking about in this case. So, Kaman Kirby Kiva, the fact that it was kolut, once it went into your courtyard, so the din is you already are going to have been koine the item even before it actually lands. So we'll have to understand why is that important. It says Rashi, kolut kamishahuncha, kolut in Perik HaZayrik. Of course, this sugi is brought down in the beginning of the Masechta of Shabbos, but the concept kolut kamishahuncha actually says hazayrik meshus reshus. If you throw from one domain to the other, kivyon shekolta aver, as soon as it goes in the airspace, even though it hasn't landed, nischai mishum Shabbos. You're immediately chai for Shabbos. Nim sachim Shabbos sachim mechira boin ke'echad. So if that's the case, that means that Shabbos and the Kinyan take place at the same time. She'aver chatzir kana l'lekeach, because also the airspace, you're kaina immediately. The fact that it's going to land, it's ki'u like it landed already. So therefore, when you throw it, and it's in the domain, even though it hasn't physically landed in that person's property, but the fact that it's now in the other person's reshus, that second in midair for those next couple of seconds, he's koine it at that moment. So therefore, he's violated as far as the mechira, but he's also chayiv Shabbos for his over an issur deraisa of hoitzah or transferring rishus or rishus. So therefore, Kimun Ramina, since they both took place at the same time, in order to be chayiv, only the bigger one, not the smaller one, is only when they both happen b'vasachas. So if you hold like the shita that kuta kamishahun chadamya, then that makes sense. The reason we're going to be potter from dal v'hei dikra banan kivan dematol lechatzer beiso kana. You're kaina immediately. So therefore, you've already violated dal v'hei through the mechira. Le'inyan Shabbos u'machayim adamat liyara, and there it doesn't until it actually lands. According to the shita, there's the shita the Rabbanan does not say klut kamishahun chadamya, and therefore for that reason, you're actually going to be maybe chayin. You'll be chayin dal v'hei. So your answer is ba'oimelo tiknili g'nemosecha ad shetanduach. So l'divir hakol, if the person says, I do not want to acquire your gneva until it lands. And therefore, if I said that, then Ladimri Hakol, the din is you're going to be chayiv because they're happening at two separate times. So again, or fakert. It's because according to the Rabbanon, you're only chayiv for Shabbos when it lands. But if you also say, I want the can only be koine, I only want the mechir to be chal once it lands, so it's still happening at Bavas Achas. So that's another reason why you'll be potter b'kimul rabina. Okay, look at question 7. Zork in Musacha lachatzerai, particularly in Musacha, him chayiv divri hakol u'ma'astadim zeh. So it's actually a machlokas. Do we say kutuk mishahuncha damya, and therefore you be potter because of Kilmir Ramina, because the Shabbos and the Mechira took place at the same time. The Lomin in Kluta Kami Shahuncha, should say it's considered, then you are going to be chayiv because it didn't happen at the same time. However, in this situation where you threw it in the situation, that you said you only want it to be kind of when it lands, so then the din is different. Because the Shabbos and the Mechir would still happen at the same time. But if you didn't make that declaration, so you'd be koinit as soon as in your rishus. However, you wouldn't be chayiv misa until it lands, and therefore would not say kimur rabbi in that case. Really, we can say this is all like the shita of Rabbi Bar Chama. What was Rabbi Bar Chama? As you said above, Amar Rabbi Bar Chama kitanihi the potter. Why are you potter? Because he says, remove my figs from my fig tree. Okay, so esnan asur taira. We know that when it comes to a din esnan of giving a matana or paying a zayna for her services, that you're not allowed to bring any of these items into the Beis Hamikdash for any neder that you made. So esnan asur taira. Ba'afil ba'al imoy. Even a person was ba'al imoy, which means, let's say he gave a tleh, an animal for which could potentially be given as a carbon, as an esnan to his mother. Now, the truth is, says Rashi, if he wouldn't have given it to her, vihi ilu tavale bedina, right? I'm not sure why she'd want to go to court on this, but if she goes to court and says, hey, this guy owes me money for my services, he doesn't have to pay her back. Because if we see, or even if there's even the din, even if he's not chay, he will be chay misa. But even if he's potter from misa, but the fact that he did an action which would be chay misa for, as we see by another shita elsewhere, so he's also going to be potter from tashlumin. So therefore, what do we see? Now, even though it's true, he wouldn't give the esnan. Ella afal gav dechika tavale. Bedina loyam rinin lezil havla. Such it says it again, that even though if she would come to ask for this money, and she takes her son to din that he owes me money for znus, the Beis Din won't tell the son to pay her since he's chay misa. But if he would give it to her, even though he didn't have to, but if he did, havi esnan, it would still be constituted the din esnan, and therefore that would not be allowed to be given so as a carbon. So hakanami, I forgot when it comes to this te'ena. Do inyan tashlumin. When the guy comes to the person, the owner of the fig tree, the one who plucked it off on Shabbos, which he's also chay misa, he wouldn't be able to go and collect from court this fig, as we continue Ein Aleph and Aleph. Nonetheless, he says it still constitutes in this situation as a mechira. It still didn't have to give it to him, but if he did give it to him, then it would constitute as a genuine mechira, and therefore, for that reason, is how we can understand that it's shaykh to have this case of Dal V'Hei taking place at the same time as an Isser Shabbos. So therefore, you don't have to come onto this case of throwing your Geneva into my Chatzer, and that they both happen in Vasachas. Maybe we're talking Posh in the situation that you told someone to remove a fig from your fig tree, and that's how the Kinyan Mechir would take place. So that also happened in Vasachas, and therefore, again, just like the Esnan, the din still is that it is an estan, even if you don't have to give it. So even though he doesn't have to give the fig, nonetheless, we don't say it's not a mechira if he did give it. Okay, we're gonna stop there. Question 7. I think we did. Yeah, we did. Okay, so let's. Fine. Question TA 28. Ganva machar b'Shabbos pater. So if he sold it on Shabbos, so ma hechi timsa shalchim misa al mechir b'Shabbos. How do we possibly have a case of mechira on Shabbos? And they ask for 2 answers. So one is he says okutz te'ena matinasi v'tikna g'nemasacha, or he said throw your genev into my chatzer. And he writes in parentheses, okay, is there another question? Adkan.